إعلان مهم.
重要提示
Important announcement.
Message important.
Важное объявление.
Anuncio importante.
يرجى من المتحدثين الكرام إلقاء بياناتهم بسرعة معقولة لضمان ترجمة فورية وافية وعالية الجودة.
为了帮助口译准确完整传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to ensure complete and quality interpretation.
Il est rappelé aux orateurs qu'ils doivent présenter leur déclaration à un rythme raisonnable afin de garantir une interprétation complète et de qualité.
Напоминаем ораторам, что для того, чтобы устный перевод был полным и качественным, необходимо выступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y de calidad.
Excelencias, distinguidos y distinguidas.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. I hereby declare open the 12th meeting of the 52nd session of the Working Group on the Universal Periodic Review. We will now proceed with the review of Latvia. Before we begin, please let me remind you that all delegations should upload their oral statements through the online system for inscription on the list of speakers event. Before the opening of the review, they intend to address, in accordance with the Human Rights Council Resolution 5/1, the review is based on the national report prepared by the state under review, namely Latvia in this case, and the compilation of UN information and the summary of stakeholders' information, both prepared by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And I have the honour to give the floor to Mr. Andrzej Willemssons, State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to introduce the delegation of the national report. Vice Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is an honor for my delegation, comprised of representatives from across the Latvian government, to be here today and to engage in this dialogue. We are pleased that civil society organizations are present here today, as their engagement and contribution to this exchange is invaluable. We also thank all delegations that submitted advanced questions. We will address them in my statement and during our replies. Mr. Vice President, Latvia is a strong advocate of the Human Rights Council and its mechanisms. The decision to seek a seat on the Council for the term from 2029 to 2031 reflects Latvia's firm commitment to promoting and protecting human rights both domestically and internationally. We regard the UPR mechanism as a great opportunity to reflect on the achievements and challenges in protecting human rights. We acknowledge that the promotion and protection of human rights requires continuous efforts and improvement. None of us, including Latvia, has a perfect human rights record. There's always space for improvement. Your recommendations are instrumental for our ongoing efforts. As a party to the major international and regional human rights treaties, Latvia consistently maintains a dialogue with treaty bodies. Their recommendations are carefully assessed by competent authorities, translated, widely disseminated, and gradually implemented. The implementation of UPR recommendations follows a decentralized framework. This approach ensures that recommendations are directly integrated into thematic policy documents and action plans, making human rights a fundamental part of every sector. Since 2001, Latvia has also extended a standing invitation to all special procedure mandate holders of the Human Rights Council. Mr. Vice President, the developments in Latvia since the last review should be looked at in the context of overall situation in Europe. Latvia, as many other countries, has faced an exceptionally challenging period. Following the COVID-19 pandemic, the resilience of our healthcare, education, and welfare system was tested. Russia's war against Ukraine profoundly affected the security environment in our region and placed new responsibilities on Latvia, including the reception and integration of a large number of refugees fleeing the war, all while developing defense plans to protect our borders and people from similar attacks. There is a saying, you cannot choose your neighbors, but you can choose your friends. Today, that idea carries an even heavier meaning. The war in Ukraine reminds us that when a neighbor shows complete disregard for international rules and basic principles of humanity, firm and decisive action is necessary, whilst fully respecting our international obligations. Latvia, like Ukraine, shares a border with the same neighbor. Many of the policies and decisions of Latvia has been taken in recent years must be understood having regard to this geopolitical reality in the shadow of the largest and most brutal conflict on European soil since World War II. These threats have been widely recognized, including by the European Court of Human Rights, which has underlined that the so-called greater stability enjoyed by Europe before Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008 and military aggression against Ukraine since 2014 no longer exists. The court underlined that Russia's rhetoric does not clearly limit its territorial ambitions. Because of these events, Latvia has increasingly had legitimate reasons to fear for its security, territorial integrity, and democratic order. These events, coupled with information and hybrid warfare operations against Latvia, have only strengthened our efforts to defend democracy, our national security, and the rights and freedoms protected by human rights treaties. This includes measures to strengthen our democratic resilience against hybrid threats, including in the sphere of free elections. Faced with these challenges, Latvia has enhanced cybersecurity monitoring, testing of election IT systems, digitalization of democratic processes, cooperation with cyber incident response institutions, and international partners to prevent risks of interference as means to strengthen the resilience of our democratic processes. Latvia prioritizes public media literacy, strategic communication campaigns by state institutions, and the non-governmental sector to bolster democratic sustainability. The promotion of civic participation in state programs fosters societal cohesion. Mr. Vice President, I would like to highlight several key achievements. Latvia has ratified the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. The Ombudsman's Office serves as national preventive mechanism and enjoys a right to conduct independent visits at places of deprivation of liberty and to issue recommendations. The ratification of the Istanbul Convention has marked a significant turning point in the prevention of violence against women and domestic violence. As we mark 15 years since the Convention's inception today, our work through 2029 remains focused on developing a comprehensive policy and legal framework, strengthening prevention, accountability, and improving support and rehabilitation services for victims. Latvia's long-term priority remains the advancement of gender equality in labor and education sectors, reduction of gender-related stereotypes, and cross-sector integration of gender equality into policy planning. Latvia has implemented its first national action plan on women, peace and security. The second plan will focus on the elimination of harmful gender stereotypes and the protection of women in conflict situations. Along with our priorities to advance gender equality, I would like to underline that the principle of prohibition of discrimination is embodied in our constitutional framework. The preamble of our constitution underlines equality as a foundational element of the Latvian society, and Article 91 of the Constitution establishes the prohibition of discrimination. As a horizontal principle of constitutional rank, it is applicable directly to all spheres of life and goes through the entire domestic legal system, ensuring that all institutions have an obligation to respect and ensure its practical application. In the context of elimination of discrimination, I would like to highlight the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights in the case of Hanovs versus Latvia, which prompted authorities to improve the methodological guidance and targeted training for law enforcement authorities, underlining that hate-motivated crimes, including against LGBTI community, require diligent and efficient reaction from the authorities. Another important development is the introduction of the institution of civil partnership, providing legal, economic, and social protection to same-sex couples. Mr. Vice President, I would like to touch upon some recurrent questions and recommendations, both received in our previous review sessions and conversations leading up to this debate. In previous reviews, Latvia has received a number of recommendations pertaining to statelessness and non-citizens. Therefore, it is crucial to recall that for half a century, Latvia was occupied by the Soviet Union, regaining independence in 1991 after the collapse of the occupying state. Latvia is not a successor state of the Soviet Union, but to avoid a situation of massive statelessness, in 1995, Latvia granted a privileged temporary status and preferential access to Latvian nationality to more than 730,000 former Soviet citizens transferred to Latvia by Soviet regime against its obligations under international law. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has acknowledged that Latvian non-citizens are not stateless persons, as they enjoy the right to reside in Latvia ex lege and a set of rights and obligations beyond the rights prescribed by the 1954 Convention, including protection from removal. Non-citizens possess Latvian identity documents and are treated as Latvian nationals. In most daily aspects, they enjoy the same rights as citizens: equal access to public services, social security, and protection abroad. The only exemptions relate to the right to vote and to take up certain positions linked to national security, which fully comply with Latvia's international obligations. In our view, naturalization, which is available to every non-citizen, is an act of their individual will and choice. Over the years, Latvia has facilitated and encouraged naturalization, alleviated naturalization requirements, and significantly lowered administrative barriers to naturalization. A significant achievement in reducing the number of non-citizens was the enactment of the law on the discontinuation of the non-citizen status for children. Since 2020, citizenship is granted at birth to all children born in non-citizen families. As a result, by 2026, the number of non-citizens has decreased to 167,340. And once more, I would like to stress that these persons are not stateless. Latvia currently is home to only 158 stateless persons. Mr. Vice President, Latvia's society has always been multi-ethnic. Our Constitutional Court has underlined that the principle of reciprocal enrichment of democratic society requires the state to support preservation and development of singularity of ethnic minorities by promoting a cohesive democratic set of society. Latvia provides all necessary means to preserve and develop native language, ethnic and cultural identity of national minorities, as well as supports their integration. As a result of the Soviet occupation authorities' Russification policy, only 52% of Latvia's population were ethnic Latvians in 1989. In 1935, Latvians made up 75.5% of the population, while Russians accounted for 10.6%. Our unique history has required us to aim our social integration policies at overcoming the consequences of the occupation by promoting the Latvian language and culture as a unifying element that enables effective participation and communication in public life and democratic processes. Since regaining independence, the authorities have actively supported learning Latvian. This has produced results. Today, 90% of Latvia's residents speak at least basic Latvian. At the same time, since Latvia restored independence, Russia has sought to hinder Latvia's social integration, including by promoting the so-called Russian world concept, preserving the idea of a post-Soviet space united by Russian language and encouraging the false division of Latvia's population into Latvians and Russian speakers. When existing and proposed laws are challenged or misinterpreted on human rights grounds, we see clarity and resolution in the courtrooms. The Constitutional Court of Latvia has been our anchor, in the past decade having adjudicated several cases concerning the use of Latvian and minority languages and state support for minority language protection. One of the most prominent examples relate to the use of Latvian language in education and during pre-election period. The Constitutional Court has found that Russian continues to be widespread in Latvia and that therefore the need to strengthen Latvian language, which was significantly restricted for more than 50 years of occupation, remains paramount. Insufficient knowledge of the state language still prevents some minority residents from fully participating in democratic processes and affects their opportunities in the labor market and higher education. My colleagues will elaborate further on the conclusions of Constitutional Court in other cases. Vice President, my delegation and I look forward to further discussing these and other topics. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we stand ready to answer any further questions you may have. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Le agradezco.
Thank you for this statement. We shall now begin the interactive dialogue. And before I give the floor to delegations for their questions and comments, I would like to remind you that the speaking time will be 1 minute 25 seconds for all. I wish to reiterate that issues of a political, bilateral and territorial nature should be kept out of our deliberations. Moreover, United Nations terminology should be used when referring to states and territories. Please be reminded that only the use of the words recommend or recommendation will ensure that the relevant parts of your statement are included in the recommendations section of the Working Group report. Likewise, allow me to recall that the Human Rights Council strongly rejects any act of intimidation or reprisal against individuals and groups who cooperate or have cooperated with the United Nations and its representatives and mechanisms in the field of human rights. We will now begin the list of speakers, and I call on the distinguished representative of Togo. Thank you, Vice President. My delegation warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks it for the national report. Togo commends Latvia's efforts to promote and protect human rights. In particular, the measures to strengthen equality of men and women, protect children, provide access to basic social services connected with health and education, and combating trafficking in persons, torture, and comparable treatment. In a constructive spirit, we make the following recommendations. 1, ratify the International Convention on the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearance. 2, ratify the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Families. 3, step up measures to combat hate speech and hate crimes, particularly against minorities and vulnerable groups. In conclusion, Togo wishes Latvia every success in implementing the recommendations from this review. Thank you. Thank you. I call on Tunisia.
شكرا سيد النائب الرئيس. نرحب بوفد لاتفيا ونتمنى له التوفيق.
Thank you, Vice President. We welcome delegation of Latvia. We note the efforts to promote human rights and commend the legal and structural reforms undertaken, in particular to implement recommendations from the previous cycle. We recommend one, stepping up funding for health services, ensuring the right to access to medicines and medical services. Second, take all necessary measures to protect victims of trafficking and combat trafficking. 3, adopt a plan of action that defines state priorities on the rights of the child. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la
Thank you. I call on Turkey.
Mr. Vice President, we commend Latvia's continued engagement with UPR mechanism. Turkey acknowledges Latvia's effort in strengthening democratic institutions, supporting persons fleeing from the war in the region, and addressing hate speech and discrimination. In a constructive spirit, we recommend Latvia to 1. Continue efforts to combat all forms of intolerance, discrimination, and hate speech, both in public life and online. 2. Continue efforts to promote the social economic integration of migrants, refugees, and persons belonging to minorities, while ensuring equal access to education, employment, healthcare, and public services. We wish Latvian delegation a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra el distinguido.
Thank you. I call on Ukraine. Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ukraine warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks it for the presentation of national report. Indeed, Mr. Wilson, we cannot choose our neighbor, but we are so happy that we have such a good friend. We commend Latvia's progress in strengthening its human rights framework, in particular the ratification and entry into force of the Istanbul Convention and the adoption of the plan for preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence, reflecting a comprehensive and victim-centered approach. We also welcome efforts to promote gender equality, enhance child protection systems, and advance inclusive policies for vulnerable groups. Ukraine expresses its sincere appreciations for Latvia's continued solidarity, including its support to Ukrainian civilians under temporary protection and to women and girls affected by conflict-related sexual violence. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Ukraine would like to make the following recommendations. Ensure the full and effective implementation of the Istanbul Convention, including by strengthening the legal framework to address all forms of gender-based violence. Strengthen efforts to eradicate violence against women and girls, including by strengthening the legal framework, improving data collection, and combating gender stereotypes. We wish the delegation of Latvia every success in review. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la
Thank you. I call on the UK.
Thank you, Vice President. The UK recognises the challenging security environment in which Latvia operates, including sustained Russian hostility, cyber and hybrid threats, and disinformation campaigns aimed at undermining democratic institutions and social cohesion. We welcome Latvia's ratification of the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, and the introduction of civil partnerships. We also recognise Latvia's strong support for accountability in Ukraine. We recommend 1. Fully implement the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, including through adequately resourced survivor support services and effective monitoring mechanisms by 2028. 2. Remove remaining legal and policy barriers to equal treatment of LGBT+ people, including by extending equal family and inheritance rights and ensuring protection from discrimination. And 3. Strengthen inclusive public communication and social cohesion measures, including through accessible public service broadcasting to ensure effective engagement with all linguistic communities. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la
Thank you. I call on Uruguay. Thank you, Vice President. Uruguay welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks it for presenting its report. We commend the contribution to the human rights mechanisms and the implementation of the last cycle's recommendations, as well as the measures taken to prevent and combat violence against women, including ratification of the Istanbul Convention. In a constructive spirit, we recommend, one, strengthening knowledge and capacities of government officials in order effectively to implement the United Nations Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment. Two, strengthen response capacities in the justice system and investigation teams through training to respond to complaints of gender-based violence effectively. And three, ensure that persons seeking international protection have effective access to asylum procedures and to non-refoulement protection. We wish Latvia every success in this full cycle. Thank you. Thank you. We will now hear a video with the statement of Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Chair. Uzbekistan welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks for its national report. We commend Latvia for its continued commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights and its active engagement with international mechanisms. Uzbekistan notes with appreciation Latvia's adoption of key strategic frameworks on social cohesion and inclusion, as well as its ratification of the Istanbul Convention and efforts to combat gender-based violence. We also welcome Latvia's measures to strengthen media freedom and address disinformation, including in the digital environment. Uzbekistan makes the following recommendations. First, to continue strengthening measures aimed at combating discrimination and hate crimes, including through enhanced training of law enforcement and improved access to remedies for vulnerable groups. Second, to further advance inclusive policies for persons with disabilities, ensuring equal access to education, employment, and public services across all regions. Uzbekistan wishes the delegation of Latvia every success in its review. Thank you for your attention.
We will now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Thank you, Vice President. We welcome the delegation of Latvia. We see with concern the lack of a comprehensive law against discrimination, shortcomings in the criminalization of hate speech, violence, and informal prison hierarchies, as well as restrictions to asylum at the border and the situation of statelessness and non-citizens. With a constructive spirit, we recommend the following. One, to adopt a comprehensive law that prohibits all manner of discrimination for sexual orientation, identity, or rather gender identity, disability, ethnicity, and religion, and strengthening the criminalization of hate speech. Two, improve prison conditions, eliminating informal hierarchies, ensuring internal safety and security, adopting a definition of torture in step with international standards, and investigating all reports of ill treatment. Third, adopt immediate measures for the prevention and punishment of gender violence, guaranteeing shelters, legal assistance, and support services. Four, guarantee asylum procedures at borders, respecting the principle of non-refoulement, facilitating the naturalization of the stateless and non-citizens, especially minors born in your territory. I thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you. I will now give the floor to Vietnam, who is not here. That being the case, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Albania. Mr. Vice President, Albania thanks the delegation of Latvia for the report and for its ongoing commitment to promotion and protection of human rights. We hail the meaningful progress made, including in the strengthening of the legislative framework and public policies aiming at equality, social inclusion, and citizen participation. We welcome the ratification of the Istanbul Convention and the adoption of national plans of action for equality between men and women and for the fight against domestic violence, as well as measures seeking to bring the inclusion of vulnerable groups and minorities. Albania would like to offer the following recommendations. One, increasingly strengthen the protection of the rights of the child, ensuring protection from all forms of violence, to include in the digital milieu. 2, step up the effective implementation of legislation seeking to increase the participation in decision-making for women. And lastly, 3rd, to develop solid mechanisms regarding the use of digital platforms, ensuring a respect for private life, non-discrimination, and transparency. I thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Algerian delegation welcomes the distinguished delegation of Latvia and thanks them for the presentation of their national report. In a constructive spirit, Algeria respectfully recommends the following. 1. To ratify the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all Migrant Workers and members of their families. 2. To take all necessary measures to safeguard the independence and impartiality of the judiciary. 3. To give full effect to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights in Latvia's domestic legislation. 4. To adopt the necessary measures to ensure the full independence and financial autonomy of the Human Rights Ombudsman. 5. To ensure timely and effective investigations, prosecutions, and appropriate sanctions for all acts of hate crimes and hate speech. 6. To establish in national legislation a definition of torture in line with Article 1 of the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. Finally, Algeria wish Latvia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Armenia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Armenia warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia. We note with appreciation Latvia's continued efforts to strengthen its normative and institutional framework for the protection of human rights, including in the areas of social inclusion. We also welcome Latvia's active cooperation with international human rights mechanisms and the adoption of key policy frameworks. Armenia would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Continue strengthening efforts to prevent and combat violence against women, including by ensuring effective implementation of National Action Plan and sustainable support services for victims. 2. Further enhance measures to ensure the full inclusion and participation of persons with disabilities, including through accessible services and adequate support systems. 3. Continue strengthening child protection systems, including by promoting family-based care, preventing violence against children, and ensuring inclusive and accessible education for all children. Armenia wishes Latvia continued success in the implementation of the accepted recommendations. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
Thank you, Vice President. We thank the Latvian delegation for its presentation. Australia commends Latvia's progress since its last review and welcomes the National Action Plan on preventing violence against women and domestic violence. We encourage continued improvements on the inclusion of Roma and LGBTQIA+ persons. Australia recommends that Latvia, 1. Continue to implement measures to prevent violence and abuse against women and girls, including by enhancing access to victim survivor support services and providing training on domestic violence and risk assessments for law enforcement. 2. Intensify efforts to address hate crimes, including due to a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, through victim support mechanisms. 3. Enhance human rights protection and social inclusion of Roma communities by implementing the Roma Strategic Framework 2024 to 2027 plan, including access to quality education and employment. Thank you.
I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Austria.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Austria welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks for their report and presentation today. Austria welcomes the implementation of reforms in social welfare and education in recent years and commends Latvia in particular on the ratification of the Istanbul Convention. Despite positive steps, high levels of violence against women and domestic violence or efforts to withdraw from Istanbul Convention give reason for concern. Also, there seems to be room for improvement in the provision of education in minority languages and regarding violence at school. Austria therefore recommends 1. Fully implement the Istanbul Convention and strengthen measures to prevent and combat violence against women, including femicide, by improving victim protection, ensuring effective investigation and prosecution, and expanding support services. 2. Ensure the provision of education in minority languages at a minimum guaranteed level by safeguarding access to instruction, adequate resources, and qualified teachers for minority language education. 3. Strengthen child protection measures by effectively preventing and addressing violence and bullying in schools, and ensure the full inclusion and integration of children of asylum seekers through equal access and support systems. And 4, ensure the effective criminalization and enforcement against hate speech, and adopt comprehensive measures to combat discrimination against specific groups of foreigners, including through legal safeguards and inclusive policies. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Azerbaijan welcomes the distinguished delegation of Latvia and thanks them for the presentation of the national report. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend Latvia the following. 1. Strengthen measures to prevent and combat corruption at all levels. 2. Take all necessary measures in law and in practice to guarantee that everyone could exercise the right to freedom of expression and prevent and combat all acts of harassment and intimidation against journalists. 3. Strengthen safeguards against torture and ill treatment in accordance with international human rights law. Azerbaijan wishes the delegation of Latvia a successful review process. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bahrain.
سيد نائب الرئيس ترحب مملكة البحرين بوفد.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We would like to welcome Latvia. We have closely and with great interest looked at the fourth report, and we have seen noted the progress in the promotion and protection of human rights. Constructively and positively, we'd like to make the following recommendations. 1, tackle hate speech and hate crimes, creating mechanisms and appeals and resources for the victims to tackle the threat of against women and children, among others. And 2, seek the best practices in law enforcement in these areas. 3, to address the salary gap between men and women through an improvement of working circumstances. And 3, improve the participation of women in public and civil service, public administration, including in key and decision-making positions. Thank you. I give the floor to Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, Bangladesh welcomes the distinguished delegation of Latvia to its 4th cycle of UPR and thanks the delegation for the presentation of its national report. We take note of the policy guidelines being implemented by the government of Latvia to foster social inclusion and cohesion, strengthen trust and civic participation, enhance access to the labor market, and safeguard the rights and well-being of women, children, and families. In a spirit of constructive cooperation, Bangladesh recommends the following. First, strengthen measures to combat hate speech and hate crime, including through effective investigation and prosecution, as well as by raising public awareness. Second, strengthen measures to eliminate all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls, and further promote gender equality and women's empowerment. Third, continue efforts to combat trafficking in persons and ensure protection and support for victims and survivors. We wish Latvia success in its review. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of Belarus.
Благодарю, господин заместитель.
Thank you, Vice President. We have studied the report by Latvia. We're concerned at the increasing problems in human rights, including discrimination on various bases and xenophobia. We call for an end to aggressive rhetoric against neighboring states, including my own, which seek to mask internal problems. We recommend 1, ending discrimination on ethnic grounds and taking back to their jobs and compensating the Belarusian and Russian citizen medical workers who were dismissed. 2, end the unlawful practice of pushbacks at the border and provide access to asylum procedures. 3, investigate in detail all claims of unlawful acts by officials of the state bodies against people on the border with a particular focus on acts that can be torture, cruel and inhuman treatment. 4, to criminalize humanitarian assistance to people seeking refugee status on the border. 5, take timely and impartial measures to investigate all acts of all deaths among detainees. 6, take measures to end deaths and suicides in prison. 7, stop the application of UCMs, which are a violation of human rights everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Belgium commends Latvia for its efforts and notable progress since its previous UPR, including the entry into force of the law on registered partnership and the steps taken to further strengthen its response to trafficking of persons. As further progress could be achieved, Belgium recommends Latvia to 1. Strengthen the legal framework to prevent and address all forms of gender-based violence, including by recognizing domestic and intimate partner violence as criminal offenses and by ensuring that victims have access to effective remedies, protection measures, and support services. 2. Prioritize the full development and rapid operationalization of an effective national referral mechanism to ensure systematic identification of all victims of trafficking and their timely referral to appropriate protection and support services, and swiftly adopt and implement comprehensive victim protection legislation. And 3. Strengthen the enforcement of legislation combating hate speech and hate crime to ensure that all cases are promptly and effectively investigated and prosecuted and that perpetrators are adequately punished. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Brazil welcomes the delegation of Latvia and appreciates the presentation of its national report. Brazil notes positively the stability of Latvia's democratic institutions, including the regular conduct of elections, as well as the effectiveness of its justice system. We also commend the progress made in reducing statelessness, a recommendation Brazil made during the last UPR cycle. In a constructive spirit, Brazil recommends that Latvia, 1. Uphold international commitments to the protection of women's rights and ensure that domestic safeguards against gender-based and domestic violence remain fully aligned with the standards of the Istanbul Convention. 2. Ensure that border management and asylum procedures fully respect international human rights and refugee law, guaranteeing individual risk assessments, unhindered access to humanitarian assistance, and due process guarantees for all persons seeking international protection. We wish Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bulgaria.
Thank you, Vice President. Bulgaria welcomes the distinguished delegation of Latvia and thanks for the presentation of the national report. We note with appreciation the efforts made by Latvia to implement the recommendations that were accepted during the third cycle of the UPR. Bulgaria commends Latvia on completing the implementation of its first national action plan on women, peace and security for 2020-25 period, and its work on the development of a new plan for the subsequent period. We note with appreciation the measures taken to ensure greater safety for journalists, including the promotion of the national online platform Journalists Alert Button and the approval of the plan for safety of journalists and other media professionals for the period 25-27. With a view to constructively contribute, Bulgaria wishes to make the following recommendations. First, continue the efforts to ensure gender equality in the labor market and education, such as the plan for promoting equal rights and opportunities for women and men for the period 24-27. Second, intensify efforts to deinstitutionalize access to school education for children with disabilities. We wish the Latvian delegation a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Canada warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia and commends its participation in this Universal Periodic Review. We welcome notable advancements in the empowerment of women and girls, the expansion of benefits and protections for same-sex couples, and the modernization of its judicial system. Canada recommends that Latvia, 1, allocate sustained and predictable multi-year funding to support implementation of the Plan for Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence 2024-29. 2, expand the partnership of framework towards full legal recognition of same-sex couples, and 3, establish standardized victim identification procedures with a national referral mechanism, as well as expand specialized law enforcement capacity to investigate and prosecute trafficking, including online exploitation, to protect all victims without discrimination. Canada notes the importance of ensuring full compliance with EU standards related to judicial independence and anti-corruption frameworks, including strengthening safeguards against undue political influence in Supreme Court judges' appointments. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chile. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Chile would like to welcome the delegation of Latvia. We thank them for their report. We positively underscore the meaningful progress in the country institutionally and in the matter of human rights since the last cycle, during the last cycle, in particular the 2021 ratification of the optional protocol of the Convention Against Torture and the naming of a ombudsperson and an NPM. Constructively and with the goal of continuing to strengthen the protection of human rights, Chile recommends to Latvia the following. 1, ratify the optional protocol and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. 2, draft and adopt a national plan of action on business and human rights that sets forth robust mechanisms for due diligence, corporate accountability, and that is in line with the UN guiding principles. 3rd, ensure that the implementation of regulations on disinformation respect free speech, establishing an independent oversight mechanisms and safeguards based on the principles of legality, need, and proportionality. 4th, adopt measures to ensure inclusion and presence of children, Romani children and adolescents in formal education system. We wish Latvia a successful review. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of China.
Mr. Vice President, China follows with interest the human rights situation in Latvia. We note that many recommendations made during the 3rd cycle of the UPR have not been fully implemented. We also note that certain human rights mechanisms have pointed out that Roma people continue to suffer discrimination in employment, education, healthcare, housing, and other areas, that the non-citizen status continues to exist for a long time, and that violence against women and domestic violence remain serious. China recommends to Latvia: first, fully guarantee the right of ethnic minorities to use their own languages. 2nd, continue to reduce statelessness and facilitate access to nationality for non-citizens. 3rd, effectively address stereotypes, prejudices, intolerance, and systemic discrimination against the Roma people. 4th, increase input in public sectors such as housing, social security, and healthcare. 5th, narrow the gender pay gap, combat gender-based violence, and improve the protection of the rights and interests of specific groups such as women and people with disabilities. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la distinguida representante de Colombia.
Muchas gracias, señor vicepresidente. Colombia da la bienvenida a la distinguida delegación de Letonia con ocasión del 4º ciclo del examen periódico universal. Colombia desea felicitar a Letonia por la ratificación del protocolo adicional a la Convención contra la Tortura.
Colombia welcomes the delegation, the distinguished delegation for their 4th cycle. We would like to recommend that they continue with efforts to ensure that the ombudspersons fully comply with the Paris principles. 2nd, that they ensure that prison conditions are fully in step with international standards on human rights, including the Mandela rules. 3rd, set the minimum age for matrimony at 18 without exception. 4, ensure that boys and girls in primary and secondary education receive a comprehensive sexual and reproductive education, including on conception to prevent child pregnancy. And 4th, to implement alternatives for asylum seekers to ensure that children never be detained for migration-related matters, and to ensure that those seeking international protection are protected from non-refoulement and have effective access to asylum procedures. We wish Latvia much success in this UPR cycle. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Costa Rica. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Costa Rica thanks the delegation of Latvia for the report, and we recognize their efforts and progress made in gender equality, institutional strengthening, and its active commitment to the agenda for women, peace, and security. Costa Rica offers the following recommendations. 1, continue to strengthen the measures aimed at preventing and reducing statelessness. 2, prioritize inclusive policies and measures to reduce the high level of Roma children in special classes or special classes or special schools. 3rd, establish a special mechanism for fighting trafficking in persons. We wish Latvia a successful implementation of these recommendations. Thank you very much. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. We offer a warm welcome to the delegation of Latvia. Constructively, we have 3 recommendations. 1, review the legal framework in place for appropriately or adequately punishing prosecutors, judges, and law enforcement officers that commit hate crimes and prejudice-based acts. 2, to reduce the subsidies for unemployment insurance and the pensions for disability and aging, and address the administrative measures to ensure that women and girls of Roma populations can have access to education, healthcare, and jobs without discrimination. We wish success to Latvia in this review and in the implementation of the recommendations. Thank you kindly. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cyprus.
Thank you, Vice President. Cyprus warmly welcomes the participation of the delegation of Latvia in today's UPR session, as well as the presentation of its national report. Cyprus commends the progress made by Latvia since its last review, including the ratification of the Istanbul Convention, the adoption of the Human Trafficking Prevention Plan for 2025 to 2027, as well as the provision of social rehabilitation for children affected by violence. Cyprus would like to make the following recommendations to Latvia. Consider adopting and implementing a comprehensive anti-discrimination law, strengthen access to special education programs for children with disabilities and special needs, and continue efforts in developing a comprehensive draft law on the prevention of gender-based violence and the prosecution of perpetrators. Cyprus wishes Latvia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The delegation of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea expresses a serious concern regarding the human rights situation in Latvia, including hate crimes and hate speech, restrictions on access to media and information, involuntary medical measures against persons with mental and intellectual disabilities, and concerns related to the protection of children's rights. Our delegation recommends 1, restore the collection of statistics on hate crimes and ensure that all forms of hate speech, including those made by politicians and senior public officials, are punished by law. 2, guarantee access to reliable information through public media and prevent harassment and intimidate of journalists. 3, ensure the protection of human rights in the process of involuntary medical treatment of persons with mental and intellectual disabilities, and improve the access to employment and the level of social security benefits. 4, strengthen programs for the protection of street children, prioritize family-based care over institutionalization, and ensure regular quality reviews of all forms of alternative care. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Dominican Republic. Thank you very much, distinguished Vice President. The Dominican Republic commends the Republic of Latvia for its commitment to the UPR. We appreciate the progress made in implementing the recommendations made in the previous cycle, particularly those targeting the fight against violence and discrimination. Further, we welcome that education in Latvia be obligatory and free as of 5 years of age. We also appreciate the efforts made to facilitate access to preschool education for all boys and girls as of 1.5 years of age, ensuring 12 years of free primary and secondary education. In a constructive spirit, we respectfully recommend 1, the ongoing strengthening of protection measures and support for those who are at risk of being victims or are victims of domestic violence against women, and 2, redouble efforts to prevent, combat, and punish effectively trafficking persons with a victims-based approach, and 3rd, to establish national mechanisms for the implementation recommendations of the human rights mechanisms. We wish Latvia a success in the implementation of the recommendations made. Thank you very much. We will now take a break from the speakers list and give the floor back to the delegation of Latvia that it may address the observations and comments that have been made thus far. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I will now give floor to my colleague from Ministry of Justice, Ms. Anda Smiltēna.
Mr. Vice President, distinguished delegates, the Ombudsman in Latvia is an independent constitutional institution elected by the parliament, responsible for the protection of human rights and promotion of good governance. The office is functionally independent from the executive branch. With the entry into the force of the optional protocol on the Convention Against the Torture, the Ombudsman's office was entrusted with the functions of the National Preventive Mechanism Against the Torture. Since January 1st, 2024, the Department on the Prevention of Discrimination was established within the Ombudsman's office to ensure a more proactive and systematic approach to non-discrimination. The Ombudsman's office has observed a significant increase in the number of applications received, which indicates a growing public trust in the institution. In February 2026, the Ombudsman's office received 345 applications, which is a significant increase compared to the 165 applications in February last year. Since October 2025, face-to-face consultations with the Ombudsman take place once in a month. People use this consultation opportunity very actively. Turning now to the area of good governance. Law on transparency of interest representation, which entered into the force on 1st January 2023, stipulates a transparency framework for the lobbying and interest representation, including definitions, registration, and declaration duties and obligation for both interest representatives and public officials. The Unified Law Drafting and Coordination Portal in Latvia became operational in September 2021. Portal serves as a central digital platform for the preparation, coordination, and consideration of draft laws and policy documents within the Cabinet of Ministers. Through the portal, the member of public, civil society organizations, and social partners can follow the development of the draft legal acts, access documents, submit opinions and comments during the consultation phase, and track the proposals through the decision-making process, thereby strengthening transparency and meaningful civic involvement in lawmaking. The portal received the United Nations Public Service Award for the Open and Innovative Governments in 2024. As regards has an obligation to ensure the legal, social, and economic protection for all families. As a result, from the 1st July 2024, the Notariate law establishes the institution of partnership, providing the protection of also same-sex couples. As of May 1st, 2026, 891 partnerships have been registered in Latvia, including 307 same-sex partnerships. By entering into a registered partnership, partners in Latvia are granted important rights in the fields of healthcare, social security, and taxation. A partner has the right to make medical decisions on behalf of the other partner if that is unable to express their will, as well as the right to receive unpaid pension amounts in the event of partner's death. The partnership also provides a certain personal income tax relief for mutual gifts, loans, and expenses related to partners' healthcare and education. In addition, partners now enjoy equal protection for the family members in the other European Union member states, as the partners exercise one of the fundamental principles of the European Union, freedom of movement, if they choose to reside in another European Union member state. Thank you for your attention.
Now I would like to give floor to my colleague from Ministry of Welfare, Ms. Agnes Gaila.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's an honor to highlight our progress on gender equality, non-discrimination, family policies, prevention of violence against women, and domestic violence. The principle of equality and non-discrimination is firmly embedded in Latvian legislation. Gender equality and non-discrimination principles are systematically integrated into policy development and normative acts. Progress in implementing international recommendations is reflected in several with the EU Pay Transparency Directive by preparing a draft pay transparency law to strengthen equal pay mechanisms, clarify job equal evaluation criteria, and increase transparency. To strengthen professional capacity for national and municipal policymakers, e-learning modules on gender equality and non-discrimination were launched in February 2026 in the State Administration School. The program covers all discrimination grounds. Latvia also works to promote inclusive work environment through diversity management training, employer consultations, and capacity building programs. To strengthen non-discrimination in practice, Latvia combines legal measures addressing visible and invisible social barriers through nationwide educational activities. In response to Sweden, United Kingdom, Belgium, and Germany, and statements made by a number of delegations on violence against women and domestic violence, Latvia continues to strengthen legal frameworks. The Istanbul Convention entered into force in Latvia on 1st of May 2024. Recognizing that full and sustained implementation of the Istanbul Convention requires a strong policy framework, Latvia adopted the first national action plan. The plan focuses on prevention through public awareness and education, including engagement of boys and men, strengthening professional capacities to ensure victim-centered responses and effective investigations, expanding access to crisis accommodation, psychosocial and legal assistance, and reinforcing rehabilitation programs to reduce the risk of repeated violence. Latvia has also introduced the internationally recognized Barnhuset model, ensuring child-friendly and multidisciplinary support for children affected by violence. Latvia considers family support and work-life balance essential for gender equality and labor market participation for all. Recent reforms introduced non-transferable parental leave, encouraging a more equal sharing of care responsibilities. Increased uptake signals positive changes in care patterns, while enhanced paternity leave and targeted support for parents of preterm children strengthen work-life balance and continued labor market participation. Childcare benefits have been significantly increased to improve families' financial security and income replacement during childcare. Higher benefits also increase social insurance contributions, strengthening long-term social security rights and supporting equal labor market participation for women and men. Over the past decade, Latvia has implemented comprehensive deinstitutionalization reforms. Community-based services and family-like care solutions are developed across all regions, significantly reducing reliance on large-scale institutions and expanding support for children with disabilities and other vulnerable groups. A cornerstone of the reform is the nationwide network of out-of-family care support centers, which recruit and support foster families, guardians, and adopters, provide training for caregiving families, and deliver tailored psychosocial support to children based on individual development plans. I thank you.
Now, floor goes to Ms. Zana Wagner from Ministry of Culture.
Honorable President, distinguished guests, Latvia's approach to social cohesion rests on a clear idea: a shared democratic public space which is enriched by the cultural identities of national minorities who are an integral part of our civic society. The Ministry of Culture maintains ongoing dialogue with the Advisory Council of Minority NGOs and the Advisory Council for the Participation of Roma. Support flows through the Latvian NGO Fund, and from 2026, a dedicated program to foster the participation of minority NGOs is integrated into the Social Integration Fund's broader framework, ensuring its continuity. National minorities are part of the long-standing song and dance festival tradition. Also in 2024, the third Latvian Ethnic Minorities Festival in Liepāja brought together nearly 1,500 participants. Beyond culture, the European Social Fund project, Safe Communities, led by the Latvia Civic Alliance, aims to strengthen social cohesion and explicitly recognizes minority-led organizations as an integral part of Latvia's civic landscape and equips them with skills to build belonging at community level. Social Memory Monitoring 2025 reports a meaningful shift. Differences in social memory are no longer shaped between Latvians and minorities as blocks, but between generations and between different experiences within the same language group. For the first time in the history of social memory measurements, it shows that the majority of Latvian society acknowledges that Latvia became part of the USSR as a result of its invasion. This is a proof that intercultural dialogue for the past decades has resulted in a shared understanding about Latvia's 108 years of statehood. This brings me to Sweden's question and also recommendation touched upon by United Kingdom and Azerbaijan. Recent public service broadcaster reform is motivated by two closely connected objectives. First, strengthening social cohesion based on the Latvian language, and second, ensuring that all groups in society have access to trustworthy, independent, and fact-based information. The reform that led to Radio 4 program closure does not aim to leave minority audiences without information, nor to exclude minority languages from public service media. Rather, it moved away from a segregated model. Now content for different linguistic audiences is planned with one editorial and strategic framework in one newsroom. And in the digital space, a space which increasingly reflects where the minority language speaking audience consume information today. This decision was taken independently and solely by the public broadcaster itself. In addition, I want to highlight that at the beginning of 2026, public broadcaster opened a new multimedia studio in Daugavpils, the second biggest city in Latvia, with rich presence of different ethnic minorities. Moreover, important development took place on 30th of March of this year. The Constitutional Court of Latvia held that public broadcasting must consider the state's constitutional duty to safeguard national security, democratic order, and the status of Latvian language. The court reaffirmed that persons belonging to national minorities must have access to mass media content in their own languages, especially when reliable information in minority languages is otherwise insufficient. The Constitutional Court held that self-sufficient minority language content, such as Russian language, is justified where there is an objective necessity, especially to counter propaganda, disinformation, and hostile information operations. Currently, 34% of commercial radio programs and 39% of retranslated TV channels in Latvia are broadcasting in Russian language. On hate speech and hate crimes, particularly against ethnic and religious minorities, migrants, and asylum seekers, recommendations that were brought up by Tonga, Turkey, Venezuela, Algeria, Australia, Latvia can confirm that our work builds on new national action plan for reduction of racism. This plan is aligned with the EU anti-racism strategy and also in context of the recommendations brought up by Australia and China. In our action plan, we explicitly recognize anti-Gypsyism as a specific form of racism. Therefore, Latvia continues and will continue the Latvian Roma Platform project with building mediation services in 8 municipalities. Through cooperation with Roma Cultural Center, the Ministry of Culture supports activities promoting cultural diversity and Roma Museum, as well as projects that challenge stereotypes and prejudice. Moreover, in November 2025, the Cabinet of Ministers also approved the action plan for the safety of journalists and other media professionals. The Latvian Journalists Association now serves as a national focal point for the Journalists Matter campaign. Also, just recently, Memorandum of Understanding was signed between the police and Latvia's Journalists Association and NGOs, providing a structured channel for reporting threats and hate speech against journalists. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. The floor now goes to Ms. Sigita Rosenthaler for Ministry of Welfare.
Mr. Vice President, distinguished delegates, it is an honor to highlight Latvia's progress in advancing the rights of persons with disabilities, strengthening social protection and promoting the rights to work. Latvia remains strongly committed to upholding human dignity, equality and non-discrimination, as enshrined in our Constitution and international obligations. In recent years, Latvia has moved from commitments to concrete reforms with clear priorities in accessibility, community-based services, and inclusive employment. We have upgraded the disability assessment system by focusing on functional capacity and individual needs while aligning financial support with the actual level of required care. This reflects a broader shift towards a person-centered approach that promotes autonomy and independence. Amendments to the law of social services and social assistance in the end of 2024 introduced a mandatory minimum basket of services at municipal level, including group homes, daycare centers, and respite services. Also, key services such as personal assistance, support persons, and psychosocial support have been expanded to enable independent living and participation. This is supported by investments in workforce capacity and targeted services. At the same time, services for persons with severe and multiple disabilities are being strengthened, including integrated care solutions that ensure access to both palliative and home care. Ensuring an adequate standard of living remains a social protection is not only income support, but a foundation for participation, employment, and self-sufficiency. Inclusive governance is ensured through active involvement of persons with disabilities and their organizations in policy development and monitoring. Beyond disability policy, Latvia is also responding to demographic aging with strong focus on dignity, inclusion, and active participation of older persons. Latvia has reinforced financial security in old age through improved pension indexation, increased tax-free thresholds, and supplements linked to contribution history. From this year, pensions are automatically recalculated for those who remain in the labor market, supporting longer working lives. A state-financed basic pension is being gradually introduced, starting with persons aged 85 and above. At the same time, there are challenges, including increasing demand for long-term care, regional disparities in access to services, and workforce shortages in the care sector. Latvia is therefore working to develop a sustainable long-term care financing model that ensures access and system resilience. The right to work remains central to dignity and independence. Latvia promotes employment of persons with disabilities through active labor market policies simplified procedures, recognition of qualification, and direct support. While concrete progress has been made, Latvia remains committed to sustained improvements and open to dialogue and constructive recommendations to advance a society where every person can live with dignity, participate fully, and realize their potential. Thank you.
Agradezco a los integrantes de la delegación.
I thank the distinguished delegation for the additional information, and we will now return to the speakers list. I now call on the distinguished representative of Egypt.
شكرا السيد نائب الرئيس. نرحب بوفد لاتفيا ونشكر.
Thank you, President. We welcome the delegation of Latvia and thank it for the national report. In a constructive spirit, we recommend one, stepping up efforts to reduce the gender pay gap, ensure equal opportunities for women in the workplace and in decision-making positions. 2, step up measures to protect vulnerable persons, such as older persons, persons with disabilities, and persons from minorities, ensuring that they may fully enjoy their socioeconomic rights. 3, continue implementing the recommendations from the treaty bodies and step up national follow-up in working with the civil society and national institutions. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la...
Thank you. I call on Estonia, Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Estonia warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia to its 4th UPR. We acknowledge the challenging security context Latvia faces and commend the progress achieved in Latvia since the last review, including strengthening its national human rights institution through legislative amendments to the Ombudsman law. We welcome Latvia's ratification of the Istanbul Convention and acknowledge measures taken to combat human trafficking, particularly those focused on protecting victims. Estonia has 2 recommendations to Latvia. 1, reject withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention and conduct public awareness campaigns to combat gender stereotypes and misconceptions about the treaty. And 2, ensure that law enforcement and judicial authorities, including police, judges, and prosecutors, receive regular training on domestic violence and anti-discrimination. We wish Latvia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la...
Thank you. I go on Finland.
Mr. Vice President, Finland welcomes the engagement of Latvia in the UPR. We commend Latvia for the adoption of the Partnerships Law of 2024 and subsequent partial improvements to the rights of sexual minorities. Finland recommends Latvia, 1, to remain a party to the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, and, in accordance with its provisions, prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence more broadly. 2, to ensure protection of persons vulnerable to human trafficking and identify and assist victims as well as punish offenders. We wish Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la...
Thank you. I call on France.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Vice President. France warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia and commends the measures taken to promote the rights of women and LGBT plus persons, particularly the ratification 2023 of the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. To strengthen the rights of LGBT plus persons and measures to combat hate speech against them. Thank you. Thank you. I call on Gambia by video statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome the delegation of Latvia and commend its constructive engagement with the UPR process. We commend Latvia for ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, which entered into force 2022, strengthening independent monitoring of places of deprivation of liberty. We also note Latvia's continued effort to strengthen its human rights framework, including measures on media literacy, civil society participation, social inclusion, and the protection of vulnerable groups. In the spirit of constructive engagement, we recommend that Latvia, 1, consider ratifying the remaining core international human rights treaties, particularly the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance and the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and members of their families. 2, strengthen the independence and capacity of the Ombudsman's Office, including by ensuring adequate financial and human resources for all aspects of its mandate. 3, intensify efforts to combat hate speech and hate crimes, including through improved data collection, training for law enforcement officials, and effective investigation and prosecution. 4, adopt comprehensive access to information legislation in line with international standards to strengthen transparency, accountability, and public participation. We wish Latvia every success in implementing the recommendations from this review. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. There appears to be an issue with the interpretation, and I will request that a written text be obtained. I now call on the Ambassador of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Georgia welcomes the delegation of Latvia. Thanks to the head of the delegation for the presentation of the national report. We positively note the ratification of the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. We are cognizant of measures taken to strengthen child protection. Here, we, Georgia, would like to recommend to Latvia, one, to ensure that the Office of the Ombudsman is in full compliance with the Paris Principles, and two, to provide equal access to quality education for all children, including children with disabilities. We wish the delegation of Latvia a successful UPR. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la distinguida.
Thank you. I call on Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Germany warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia and commends its continued commitment to human rights and the rule of law, especially in challenging circumstances. We note with appreciation progress achieved in recent years, including the ratification of the Istanbul Convention and legislative reforms taken to promote the equality of same-sex couples. At the same time, Germany notes some persistent challenges, such as the need for effective implementation of the Istanbul Convention to address gender-based violence. Germany therefore recommends that Latvia, one, ensure comprehensive implementation of the Istanbul Convention, including strengthened support for survivors of gender-based violence and preventive measures. Two, address remaining legal gaps to guarantee equal rights for same-sex couples. And three, continue efforts to ensure social, economic, and cultural participation across all population groups by reducing the gap between urban and rural regions. We wish Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la distinguida.
Thank you. I call on Greece, Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Greece welcomes the delegation of Latvia to the fourth UPR cycle. We acknowledge the challenging security environment Latvia faces and the organized disinformation campaigns aimed at disrupting its social cohesion. We commend Latvia for ratifying the Istanbul Convention and for adopting the Plan for Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence 2024-29. We also commend Latvia for measures taken to strengthen the independence of its media environment, including through the adoption of the Media Policy Guidelines 2024-27 and the relevant implementation plan. Greece would like to recommend that Latvia, one, continue efforts to address harassment and intimidation against journalists and ensure their effective protection. Two, continue taking measures to adopt and implement a coherent, inclusive education strategy for children with disabilities, ensuring adequate resources and accessible learning environments. Three, strengthen its efforts to guarantee gender equality in all spheres of life and continue addressing discriminatory attitudes and gender stereotypes. Greece wishes the delegation of Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la distinguida representante de.
Thank you. I call on Iceland.
Thank you, Vice President. Iceland welcomes the delegation of Latvia and its national report. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Iceland recommends the following. One, strengthen the legal framework of protection against all forms of gender-based violence, including domestic and intimate partner violence as a freestanding criminal offense. Two, strengthen availability and accessibility of sexual and reproductive health services, ensuring access to affordable, safe, and effective contraceptives, including for adolescents. Three, ensure universal access to comprehensive sexuality education in and out of school settings. Four, legalize same-sex marriage. Five, amend and adopt comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation to include diverse SOGIESC as prohibited grounds for discrimination. Ban conversion therapy. We wish Latvia all success for its review. Thank you.
Gracias. A continuación.
Thank you. We will now hear a video from India. I have to say that if the UPR cannot be carried out with interpretation, so if there's a technical issue, then I will ask that the video be interrupted. Thank you.
Mr. President, we appreciate efforts of the government of Latvia towards social inclusion and measures taken to combat violence against women. In the spirit of constructive engagement, my delegation would like to offer following recommendations. First, take steps to promote economic, social, and cultural rights of ethnic, religious, and linguistic minorities, including their rights to practice their religious and cultural identity. Second, take steps to preserve equal access to education for children, particularly to use his or her own language in accordance with Article 30 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Third, take measures for safe, respectful, non-discriminatory, and enabling work environment for migrant workers and students. And fourth, continue to take necessary legislative and policy measures to prevent hate speech, hate-motivated crime, and racial attacks against migrant workers and students. Thank you.
A continuación tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I call on Indonesia.
Vice President, Indonesia welcomes the participation of Latvia in the fourth cycle of UPR. We underline Latvia's commendable measures in developing media literacy to foster societal resilience against manipulations in the information space, including the adoption of legislative safeguards to counter AI-generated disinformation during elections. On the protection of minorities, we recognize Latvia's continued efforts to promote the preservation of cultural identity of the minorities, embrace their cultural diversity, and strengthen their inclusion into the Latvian society. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, we recommend that Latvia, 1. Ratify the International Convention on the Protection of the Migrants of all migrant workers and members of their families as previously recommended. 2. Investigate and prosecute public hate speech and hate crimes, including incitement of hatred on the grounds of race, ethnicity, nationality, and religion or belief. 3. Strengthen legal framework to prevent and eliminate violence against women and domestic violence, as well as provide comprehensive protection to the victims. 4. Ensure that all school children belonging to minority groups fully enjoy equal access to the learning of minority languages at all levels of education.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I call on the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Iran takes note of the engagement of Latvia with the UPR process. At the same time, concerns remain regarding the human rights situation in Latvia, especially with regard to migrants, as well as issues related to hate speech, hate crimes, and the protection of minority rights. In the spirit of constructive engagement, we recommend that Latvia first take effective measures to ensure full respect for the rights of migrants, including by preventing any form of ill treatment or discrimination. Second, adopt robust measures to prevent and combat hate speech and hate crimes in law and in practice. Third, undertake legislative and judicial reforms aimed at promoting and protecting the rights of minorities. Iran wishes Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la distinguida representación.
Thank you. I call on Iraq.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. يرحب وفد العراق برئيس وأعضاء وفد لاتفيا ويقدر جهودها المبذولة في إعداد وتقديم تقريرها الرابع. وأخذنا علما بالمبادرات الإيجابية التي تبنتها لاتفيا ومنها الخطة الوطنية الخامسة للحكم المفتوح وخطتي سياسة إدماج الروما. وبروح الحوار البناء يتقدم العراق بالتوصيات الآتية.
Perdón, ¿puedo interrumpir un momentito?
And the plan of action for the inclusion of the Roma. We note the efforts made with the fifth program.
Gracias.
If you could please resume.
Okay. شكرا السيد.
Thank you, Vice President. We welcome the delegation of Latvia and commend the efforts made to draw up the fourth report. We note on consider lifting the reservations to the Refugee Convention and the Convention on Statelessness to combat hate speech and hate crimes and bring perpetrators to justice with compensation for victims and awareness raising among society for improved prison conditions to ensure that international standards are respected, including the Nelson Mandela rules. 4, take the necessary measures to combat torture and other cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment, and review the definition of torture in the legislation in order to ensure that it's in line with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We wish every success to Latvia. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, and apologies for the mistake. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ireland.
Thank you, Vice President. Ireland welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks them for their presentation. Ireland welcomes Latvia's efforts to advance human rights domestically and commends progress made since the last UPR cycle. We welcome the adoption of a plan for promoting equal opportunities for persons with disabilities and its 5 key actions to advance the rights of persons with disabilities. Ireland notes Latvia's efforts to progress women's rights through the adoption of a National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security and the ratification of the Istanbul Convention in 2023. We are concerned by recent proposals to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention and urge Latvia not to withdraw from this convention. Ireland recommends that Latvia, 1, continue to strengthen its efforts to address gender-based violence, including through the full implementation of the Plan for Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence 2024 to 2029.
Italy.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Italy thanks the distinguished delegation of Latvia and welcomes efforts to promote access to the naturalization process and to reduce statelessness, while encouraging continued progress towards full social inclusion. Italy offers the following single recommendation. Continue supporting the Istanbul Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, notably by remaining a party to it and ensuring its effective implementation. Distinguished delegates, could you please share your views on the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, as well as any measures taken to move forward on the process of ratification of this critical instrument of the international human rights framework? We wish Latvia a most successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegate of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Japan warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia to this session. Japan appreciates the positive steps taken by Latvia to ensure women's rights, including its adoption of national plans to prevent and combat violence against women, and to promote equal rights and opportunities for women and men. We also commend the measures taken by the government to promote the integration of national minorities and the preservation and development of minority cultural identity, including through the development of a Roma inclusion policy and support for cultural diversity. Japan would like to make 2 recommendations. 1, continue to strengthen the rights of persons with disabilities, including by facilitating their access to employment. And 2, strengthen efforts to ensure equal access to economic, social, and cultural rights without discrimination, particularly in the areas of employment, health, and education. We wish the delegation of Latvia every success in the review. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from the delegation of Jordan with the video message. I won't reissue my previous recommendation.
شكرا السيد نائب الرئيس. يرحب وفد الأردن بوفد لاتفيا ويشكره.
Thank you, Vice President. We welcome the delegation of Latvia and we thank them for their national report. It underscores the efforts deployed to strengthen human rights, including social inclusion, the fight against discrimination, the strengthening of participation of society, and the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities and marginalized groups. We have the following constructive recommendations. One, to continue with the adoption of policies and measures to fight against all forms of discrimination, strengthening social inclusion for all groups in society, strengthen efforts to ensure access for persons with disabilities to education and basic services so that there is an equality of chance and so that there's no discrimination. We wish Latvia full success in these efforts. Thank you very much. We will now hear from the delegation of Kazakhstan, also with the video message.
Thank you, Chair. Kazakhstan welcomes the delegation of Latvia to the fourth cycle of UPR and appreciates its national report. We note Latvia's efforts to strengthen its human rights framework, including measures aimed at promoting social cohesion and addressing discrimination. At the same time, we encourage Latvia to continue advancing inclusive approaches that ensure equal opportunities for all residents, including persons belonging to long-term residents with non-citizen status. We would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Further strengthen policies promoting social cohesion and the inclusion of national minorities, including by ensuring effective access to education, public services, and participation in public life without discrimination. 2. Continue strengthening measures to prevent and address gender-based violence, including by improving reporting mechanisms, victim support services, and access to justice for all women and girls. We wish the delegation of Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
We will now hear from the distinguished delegation of Lebanon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Lebanon warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Latvia. We commend Latvia for grounding its policies in the promotion and protection of human rights, with particular emphasis on inclusion and non-discrimination. We also welcome the notable progress achieved in strengthening public participation and supporting civil society. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Lebanon recommends that Latvia, 1. Continue its efforts to safeguard the independence of the judiciary, 2. Intensify its efforts to eradicate violence against women and girls, in particular by strengthening the relevant legal framework, as well as through public education programs and community-based awareness initiatives aimed at combating the normalization of violence against women. 3. Further strengthen measures to effectively prevent, combat, and punish trafficking in persons, including by accelerating the establishment of a national referral mechanism and enhancing support services for victims. We wish the delegation of Latvia every success in the outcome of its Universal Periodic Review. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias. Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Libya.
شكرا السيد نائب الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We would like to welcome Latvia, and we thank them for their report. Our constructive recommendations are the following. 1, take measures that are effective to fight against hate crimes and hate speech, bringing those responsible before justice. 2, end remand and look at alternatives to imprisonment. 3, take measures to improve the participation of women in public life, improving also the legislative framework for protecting women from all forms of violence. We wish full success to Latvia in this review. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished ambassador of Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lithuania warmly welcomes our neighbors, the delegation of Latvia, and thanks it for the presentation of the national report. We acknowledge Latvia's efforts to implement the recommendations accepted during the third UPR cycle, including those submitted by Lithuania. We welcome the adoption of the several strategic policy planning documents across various sectors, especially, first, the guidelines for the development of children, youth, and the family, and second, the Media Policy Guidelines. These policies will help Latvia to enhance the protection of the children's rights, media independence, and resilience to disinformation. We also welcomed Latvia for amending its domestic legal framework and expanding existing mandates with the aim to improve gender-based violence prevention and gender equality. Lithuania wishes to offer Latvia the following recommendation: to strengthen the Office of the Ombudsman by providing functional immunity for the Ombudsman and establishing limits on the Ombudsman terms of office. We wish Latvia a successful review. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished Ambassador of Luxembourg. Mr. Vice President, Luxembourg thanks Latvia for their national report. We hail their progress in the area of human rights. Luxembourg wishes to commend Latvia for their efforts over the last several years, seeking to implement their first National Plan of Action, Women, Peace, and Security, 2020-2025. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Luxembourg offers the following recommendations. 1, strengthen the fight against gender-based violence, lifting these acts to the status of standalone criminal crime and strengthening the reporting of acts of violence. 2, ensure the right to legal counsel from the beginning of deprivation of liberty and to ensure rapid, profound, and impartial examination of provincial detention. 3rd, to abstain from adopting or enacting laws that are discriminatory against LGBTQIA+ that could restrict their freedom of association and free speech. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Malaysia welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks His Excellency State Secretary for the presentation of Latvia's national report. Malaysia commends Latvia for the progress made in its institutional framework, particularly on improving the rights of children and women, as well as enhancing social inclusion. We also commend its continued engagement with Human Rights International Mechanism to further promote and protect human rights in the country, particularly since the last UPR cycle. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Malaysia recommends the following. First, strengthen efforts to combat hate speech and hate crimes, including by ensuring effective investigation, prosecution, and victim support, as well as improving data collection and public awareness. Second, ensure that language policies and practices, particularly in education, are implemented in a manner that promote inclusion and does not result in discrimination against linguistic minorities. And third, enhance efforts to improve access to affordable and quality healthcare while strengthening healthcare workforce capacity. We wish Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Maldives.
Mr. Vice President, the Maldives warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation from Latvia to this 4th cycle review and thanks the delegation for their presentation today. The Maldives acknowledges Latvia's progress on strengthening the foundation of its policies on human rights participation and social inclusion through the adoption of several strategic policy documents across various sectors. We also welcome Latvia's comprehensive approach to reduce discrimination, which combines legislation, education, social protection, and cultural policy. In a constructive spirit, the Maldives makes the following 2 recommendations. 1, enhance efforts to mitigate the adverse impacts of climate change by taking measures to achieve its nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement and for the implementation of its transition to a net zero economy by 2050. 2, take effective measures to guarantee targeted support to groups who are disproportionately affected by poverty, in particular children, single-parent families, older persons, and persons with disabilities. We wish Latvia a successful review. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished ambassador of Malta.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Malta welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks them for the country report. We commend Latvia on its various guideline documents and strategies that focus action on various fields, including education, children and youth, and those to strengthen media independence and literacy. We also commend Latvia for ratifying the Istanbul Convention and note the ongoing domestic debate on maintaining Latvia's status as a state party. we would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Maintain Latvia's ratification of the Istanbul Convention. 2. Strengthen legal frameworks for the protection of women against all forms of gender-based violence, including domestic and intimate partner violence. 3. Further enhance protection of hate crimes, including to LGBTIQ+ persons, through legislative reforms. 4. Guarantee universal access to primary education and address the causes of non-completion, paying particular attention to disadvantaged and marginalized children. Malta wishes Latvia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias. A continuación.
Thank you. We will now hear a video message from the delegation of the Marshall Islands by video.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of the Marshall Islands welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks them for the presentation of the report. We welcome Latvia's sustained efforts to promote gender equality and commend its adoption of the plan for promoting we commend Latvia's efforts to improve accessibility infrastructure for persons with disabilities in rural areas and advance the quality of education for marginalized children. However, we are concerned with Latvia's withdrawal from the Anti-Personal Mind Ban Convention. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend the following. 1. Consider joining as a state party to the Anti-Personal Mind Convention. 2. Continue to advance the rights of women, including by ratifying the optional protocol to CEDAW. And I thank you.
We will now hear a statement from the delegation of Mauritius, also through a video message.
Thank you, Chair. Mauritius extends a warm welcome elections against manipulations using artificial intelligence. In a constructive spirit, we recommend that Latvia adopts anti-discrimination laws to ensure the promotion and protection of all. We wish Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the distinguished Deputy Ambassador of Mexico. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. We thank Latvia for their report. We recognize their commitment to gender equality, and we also appreciate the adoption of the plan to prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence 24 to 29. Constructively and respectfully, Mexico recommends access to asylum procedures, as well as respect for non-refoulement. Third, implement measures to ensure full respect for IHL and international human rights law in mine action, maintaining commitments to the goals of the Ottawa Convention. We wish Latvia success in this review cycle. Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Montenegro.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Montenegro welcomes the distinguished delegation of Latvia. We commend Latvia for its commitment to protecting and promoting human rights, as reflected in a comprehensive policy framework centered on inclusion, equality, and non-discrimination. We particularly welcome Latvia's proactive stance against all forms preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence. We also recognize Latvia's continued efforts to advance Roma inclusion, gender equality, and the rights of persons with disabilities. In this spirit, we encourage Latvia to further advance the realization of economic, social, and cultural rights under the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, with particular focus on inclusive education, the protection of children, and the prevention of violence against women and girls. Education to ensure that children with disabilities have access to mainstream schools with adequate human, technical, and financial resources to support their inclusion. We wish Latvia a successful UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Morocco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My delegation would like to welcome the delegation of Latvia and thanks them for presenting their national reports. My delegation particularly welcomes the systematic implementation process for all adopted UPR recommendations. Morocco would like to commend the adoption Aware of all efforts already made and in a constructive spirit, Morocco would like to make the following 3 recommendations. 1. Open a regional discussion to overcome the blockage that prevents the ratification of the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all ensure that all acts of hate speech and hate crimes are promptly and effectively investigated and that perpetrators are prosecuted. We wish to the delegation of Latvia full success in this UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor. We will actually interrupt our remarks from the speakers list to allow for the delegation to address the comments and observations made thus far. Madam Minister, or Mr. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I will now give floor to Ms. Laura Treimane from Ministry of Education and Science.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, it is my honor to speak on behalf of the Ministry of Education and Science. Every inhabitant of Latvia has the right to quality education. This right is protected under the Constitution of the Republic of Latvia. Furthermore, the law on education defines the right to inclusive, non-discriminatory education. Accordingly, everyone has the right to an educational process that, regardless of learners' background or abilities, promotes their participation by appropriate educational programs, suitable teaching methods, and adapted environment. This includes access to education also to migrants and refugees. Several delegations underlined the importance of inclusion of persons with disabilities. Latvia has made significant steps over the past years in this regard. The reform of special needs education enables the integration of special needs learners in mainstream education programs, thereby reducing the segregation of learners. Consequently, the data show that the number of students with special needs in general educational programs is increasing. Attention is also paid to timely diagnostics of early learning difficulties, so-called early screening, and the capacity building of the teaching assistants is enhanced, including for Roma children. Considering the recommendations many of the delegations made, I want to mention children, especially at preschool and primary level. Dear delegates, since the beginning of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the Ukrainian refugee children are accommodated and guaranteed the opportunity to attend Latvian educational institutions. Moreover, support measures for Ukrainian children and youth are provided in informal settings to reduce the trauma caused by the war, to promote their recovery, to facilitate the Latvian language learning and allow them meeting their peers. Speaking more generally, to improve access to quality education, the General education financing reform, called the Program in School, is currently implemented in Latvia. It has a twofold goal. First, it will establish a more advanced school ecosystem and provide equitable access to quality educational environment for every child, regardless of the region and municipality. This will address the regional disparities and include the most marginalized. While maintaining robust quality criteria for all public schools, we have introduced the so-called accessibility schools that are critical for certain regions in terms of access to education. These include also schools near the Latvian border, in particular in Latgale, that will have a special financing program allowing them to operate even if the number of students is low. And second, the financing reform will ensure more competitive remuneration to all teachers, as well as additional funding for support personnel in schools. Furthermore, regular professional development for teachers is ensured to advance teachers' abilities to work in diverse classrooms. Also supported by the EU funds, local municipalities in cooperation with partners implement an educational ecosystem approach called School in a Community to reduce the risk of social exclusion for children and young people. I would also like to outline the reform of the transition to teaching in the state language, Latvian, in all schools of Latvia. Evidence shows that the proficiency of the state language ensures equal access to education and work opportunities and strengthens the democratic culture and social inclusion as a whole. At the same time, persons belonging to ethnic minorities have the right to preserve and develop their language and their ethnic and cultural identity in Latvia, in line with Latvia's international commitments. Aside from the existing programs based on bilateral and multilateral agreements, children of minority backgrounds can learn their language and their cultural identity as part of non-formal extracurricular educational programs that are funded by the state in cooperation with local governments. On the whole, the implementation of the transition to the state language in Latvia is carefully monitored and analyzed to ensure that all schools receive support for the transition and are able to fully work in linguistically diverse environments. I have to emphasize that the Consultative Council of Minority Education was actively involved in this transition process during the recent years. Lastly, today, as we know, the forms of education are changing rapidly, and inclusion remains as important as ever in the AI era. Latvia has defined technology-assisted learning as an inherent part of quality learning process. AI holds an immense potential for personalized learning and for reducing teacher workload. In Latvia, we are building a competitive and safe AI ecosystem for education. These efforts aim to ensure that artificial intelligence supports every learner and teacher and promotes innovation in education while remaining safe and trustworthy. To conclude, we firmly believe that the policy measures Latvia has taken will contribute to the accessibility of high-quality education for each child and young person, and will play a vital role in social cohesion, strengthening a shared sense of belonging, promoting equity and equal opportunities, and supporting the country's long-term stability and democratic resilience. I thank you.
Thank you. The floor goes now to Mr. Sven Henkusen from Ministry of Health.
Mr. Vice President, distinguished delegates, I'm pleased to share Latvia's perspective on the implementation of the right to health and the practical steps we are taking to strengthen accessibility, quality, sustainability, and patient-centered care within our health system. The right to health can only be meaningful if it is translated into practice. In Latvia, this means focusing on accessibility, including regional access and access to medicines, improving quality and sustainability, and ensuring that care remains patient-centered. One of our most important recent reforms in quality improvement has been the establishment of methodological leadership institutions in 8 fields of medicine. These institutions support the development of evidence-based treatment standards, strengthen quality monitoring, and provide guidance and training for health professionals. We also consider independent oversight to be an important part of improving the health system. Evaluations by ombudsman, including psychiatric inpatient institutions, have helped us to identify shortcomings and have supported further work on issues such as improving of compulsory psychiatric treatment and better coordination between health and social sectors. Accessibility remains a major priority. Latvia recognizes the disparities that may arise between urban centers and rural remote regions. We're strengthening primary healthcare, supporting the sustainability of family medicine practices in the regions, expanding remote consultations, and improving the availability of patient and general practitioner mobility solutions and financial motivation. Workforce shortages remain one of the most serious challenges for service availability. To address this, the Ministry of Health is gradually increasing the number of state-funded residency places and planning them more strategically within a particular focus on hospitals, regions, and family medicine. We're also expanding the number of nursing study places in higher education. At the same time, Latvia is reviewing healthcare service tariffs so that services can be planned in line with quality guidelines and actual staffing needs, including support for nursing work. We're also paying a greater attention to workplace safety, including reporting systems for violence and support measures such as mentoring and supervision in the context of healthcare. Another important area is access to reimbursed medicines. Latvia has introduced targeted measures to improve medicines affordability, especially for vulnerable groups and for patients who depend on multiple medicines in their daily treatment. These steps are delivering practical benefits and reducing the financial burden on patients. Maternal and child health is also among the key priorities of Latvia's healthcare policy. Our 2025-2027 plan foresees measures to strengthen quality, accessibility, and patient-centered care across full continuum, from family planning to postnatal support. We're placing particular emphasis on reducing maternal mortality, improving care for women with high-risk pregnancies, and ensuring better support for women exposed to social exclusion. A notable example is the planning of midwife project, which aims to strengthen the role of midwives in primary care in the supervision of physiological pregnancies. This will improve access to reproductive health services, strengthen public education on sexual and reproductive health, and provide better support before and after childbirth. At the same time, Latvia continues to invest in early diagnostics and preventive care for pregnant women. These measures will support safer pregnancies and better health outcomes for both mother and child. Latvia remains committed to advancing the right to health in a way that is equitable, sustainable, and centered on human dignity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Gatis Švika from Ministry of Interior.
Good afternoon. First, I will touch upon steps taken in the area of trafficking in human beings. While Latvia has established a legal and institutional framework for the identification and referral of victims of trafficking, we are currently advancing towards a more comprehensive, formalized, and integrated system throughout the implementation of National Action Plan 25-27 and the development of a law on recognition and support for victims in human trafficking. This leads to the question by Belgium, Canada, Costa Rica, and Lebanon on national referral mechanism. In practice, Latvia maintains a functioning referral system, and potential victims of trafficking are identified by the state police, the social rehabilitation service provider, and other first contact institutions, including state and municipal institutions and NGOs. Where a person is identified as a possible victim of trafficking, information is provided on available support measures, and the person is referred to state-funded social rehabilitation services. This support may be accessed also outside the framework of criminal proceedings, thereby ensuring the victim-centered approach. With the adoption of the new law, a national referral mechanism will be formalized. The draft law will set clear rules for information sharing and procedure for referring victims to appropriate support services, as well as specific rules for third country nationals. Victims of trafficking are recognized as a particularly vulnerable group within the Latvian legal framework, including in the field of migration, and are granted the status of specially protected victims in criminal proceedings, ensuring enhanced procedural rights and safeguards. Thus, Latvia is transitioning from an established practice-based cooperation model towards a more explicit and comprehensive legal framework. In recent years, Latvia has implemented both basic and advanced training formats, including e-learning programs, simulation-based exercises, and train-the-trainer initiatives, ensuring a multiplier effect across institutions. Large-scale training efforts have reached several hundreds of officials, including over 600 border guards, trained especially in victim identification. As regards the fight against violence, especially against women, and in order to strengthen the protection of certain individuals against violence, amendments to the criminal procedure law were adopted, envisaging the introduction of a new instrument, electronic surveillance, as a mechanism for control. The practical application was launched in 2025, when by decision of the investigating magistrate, the security measure electronic surveillance was applied to 5 suspects. Issues of violence remain as one of the widely raised themes in society, contributing to citizen engagement and reporting activity. The statistics shows increase of reported cases of violence, including reporting of abuses against minors without waiting for severe consequences to occur. This trend shows an increase in public awareness, early recognition of signs of violence, and greater willingness to report potential risks. Various social campaigns and resonant cases have contributed to the reporting of previous crimes, especially sex crimes, which are characterized by high latency. Moving now to combating hate crime and hate speech, it has been identified as one of the priorities of State Police of Latvia. Personnel education measures are being implemented to improve the quality of investigation and communication with targeted hate speech audiences. The State Police also continues to educate its staff to improve its ability to recognize hate speech in the digital environment and communicate more effectively with victims. Regarding hate speech and hate crimes towards the LGBT+ community, State Police has introduced the principle of delegated representative. State Police has nominated a liaison officer for contacts with LGBT+ community, and a mechanism has been developed for reporting the risk cases. Now about the situation on the Latvian-Belarus border. Latvia in its eastern border is facing with the instrumentalization of migrants since 2021, an intentional and externally driven measure by our neighboring countries to exert pressure, undermine our territorial integrity and national security, a type of hybrid warfare. Latvia is fully aware of and respects its international obligations and human rights, closely cooperates with the NGOs and international monitoring mechanisms. Latvia continues to apply individual assessment of each case in order to detect any vulnerability and risks of a person's appearing at the border, including principle of non-refoulement and need for international protection. International protection, ensuring adherence to the principle of non-refoulement. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker from our side would be Ms. Kristiana Kalniņa from Ministry of Justice.
Mr. Vice President, distinguished delegates, first, I would like to address the issue of domestic violence. Latvia's criminal law is based on the principle of gender equality. It establishes liability for a broad range of violent conduct, including physical, sexual, and psychological violence, threats, stalking, failure to comply with protection orders, as well as cruel or violent treatment within close relationships. Law recognizes as an aggravating or qualifying circumstance a criminal offense involving violence or threats of violence, where such acts are committed against a close relative, current or former intimate partner, or a person with whom the offender shares a household. In response to the questions raised by Belgium, Sweden, United Kingdom, and Germany concerning the strengthening of legal protection and access to remedies for victims, Latvia, following the ratification of Istanbul Convention in 2023, has undertaken targeted legislative steps to strengthen criminal liability. In particular, criminal liability for threats to commit murder or cause serious physical harm, stalking, and failure to comply with protection orders was strengthened. These offenses were reclassified, thereby imposing stricter penalties. Criminal proceedings involving violence or threats are prioritized in law in order to ensure timely and effective handling. In 2024, significant amendments entered into force. The new section, Cruelty and Violence Against Close Family Members, was introduced, providing the provision of liberty for up to 3 years and ensures that such offenses are investigated without the victim's report. In the same year, Latvia also introduced administrative liability for sexual harassment. Other improvements have been made in 2026, including criminalization of non-consensual distribution of intimate images and increase of the limitation periods for sexual offenses against minors. In order to supplement the protection provided for in criminal law and taking into account the state's obligation to ensure the implementation of preventive measures, a new temporary protection measure in the civil procedure law was introduced in 2021. The obligation for the perpetrator to complete a social rehabilitation course to reduce violent behavior. It is an important step in order to prevent and reduce the recurrence of violence. The regulation on temporary protection against violence is being constantly improved. Training of justice system professionals in the matter of violence, prevention, and victim protection is provided regularly, including through the implementation of international programs, organizing training cycles in the regions, and specialized training at the Judicial Academy. The training covers both theoretical and practical aspects and is provided to judges, prosecutors, and court staff. There are numerous information events and communication campaigns organized on state-provided legal aid and state compensation for victims. Their aim is to promote public understanding of available legal protection mechanisms. Inmates and replaces outdated prison infrastructure that no longer met requirements of human rights. The new also strengthens the implementation of resocialization and reintegration programs. Moreover, new infrastructure facilitates conditions which reduce the subculture of informal hierarchy among inmates, and in that matter, ensures enforcement measures pointed out by the European Court of Human Rights. This year, Latvia will close 3 old prisons. Following that, Latvia plans to start the operation of the new prison also for women in 2030. The training center of Latvian Prison Administration opened in January 2025. It is designed to professionalize prison staff through modern, value-based education, shifting from purely security-oriented model to one grounded in human dignity, proportionality, and reintegration. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next speaker from our side will be Ms. Christina Grunte from Prosecutor General's Office.
Mr. Vice President, distinguished delegates, in my speech I will respond to questions regarding gender-based and domestic violence as well as hate speech. Latvia remains firmly committed to the prosecution and protection of human rights and the effective investigation and prosecution of serious crimes, including gender-based violence and hate crimes. The prosecutor's office plays a central role in supervising the legality of criminal proceedings and ensuring accountability. Priority is given to cases involving violence against women and hate-motivated offenses, and in all cases consider it especially significant if any issue arises that could delay or hinder the progress of the investigation, prosecutors are required to immediately inform a higher-ranking prosecutor who is tasked with actively overseeing these proceedings from the very beginning. Senior prosecutors review such cases at least once every 2 months to ensure that investigations move forward effectively and without unnecessary delay. To further strengthen the quality of the prosecutorial work, a system of coordinating prosecutors was introduced in 2021. The aim of this initiative is to enhance cooperation and ensure consistent high standards across the prosecution offices. Experienced prosecutors provide guidance, professional advice, and methodological support to their less experienced colleagues. Specialized coordinating prosecutors are also appointed in key areas including hate crimes and violence against women. Their role is to ensure expertise, consistency, and a more effective response to these serious offenses. The prosecutor's office continues to strengthen the fights against gender-based violence. Since July 2024, new criminal law amendments ensures clear accountability for violence within families and between partners, including former partners and spouses. And prosecutors actively handle domestic abuse cases. And thus, the prosecutor's office is equipped with the necessary resources to effectively investigate and prosecute such offenses. At the same time, continuous professional trainings ensures that prosecutors apply the law consistently, assess evidence appropriately, and safeguard victims' rights while maintaining close cooperation with other institutions. As regarding hate crimes, Latvia has taken steps to ensure consistent and professional approach in identifying and prosecuting such offenses. A specialized coordinating prosecutor has been appointed to oversee hate crime and hate speech cases. This expert provides practical support and regularly delivers training to investigators, prosecutors, lawyers, and judges. This ensures a shared understanding of legal standards and strengthens the effective handling of such cases. Prosecutors are required to identify hate motives in all relevant cases, including those who are initially classified as other offenses, such as hooliganism or minor bodily harm. Amendments to the criminal law have established hate motivation, including racist, ethnic, religious, or social hatred, as an aggravating circumstance. Furthermore, internal guidelines and orders require active prosecutorial supervision from the earliest stages of proceedings, ensuring that the potential hate motives are not overlooked. Training remains a key priority, and prosecutors and staff regularly participate in programs addressing hate speech, protection of vulnerable groups, and these efforts strengthen both legal accuracy and sensitivity to the needs of affected communities. Latvia also actively participates in international cooperation and knowledge exchange, and prosecutors engage in international conferences and training initiatives to further enhance expertise in combating hate crimes. Finally, the prosecutor's office systematically reviews decisions to terminate criminal proceedings to ensure they are lawful, well-founded, and free of superficial assessment, particularly in cases involving potential hate motives. Taking together, these measures strengthen the effectiveness and quality of criminal justice, promote consistency across institutions, and contribute to building public trust while reducing the risk of impunity. Thank you for your attention.
Gracias de nuevo a los miembros de la delegación.
I thank the distinguished delegate.
We take good note of Latvia's commitment to protect and promote human rights in the country. We appreciate Latvia for its constructive engagement with the international human rights mechanisms and take good note of the efforts made to implement the recommendation of previous cycle. Nepal commends Latvia for the accession to the optional protocol of the Convention Against Torture. In a constructive spirit, Nepal recommends Latvia the following. 1. Strengthen measures to reduce the gender pay gap and promote gender equality in all walks of life. 2. Continue efforts towards ensuring equality in labor market and expanding social protection coverage. 3. Redouble efforts towards strengthening public infrastructures to promote inclusivity and enhance accessibility of persons with disabilities. We wish Latvia all success in its UPR. I thank you.
The Netherlands commends Latvia for its continued progress in strengthening the protection of human rights, including efforts to promote social inclusion and equality. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, the Netherlands recommends to 1. Continue efforts aimed at remaining a state party to the Istanbul Convention, including through awareness campaigns addressing misconceptions surrounding the Convention. 2. Implement the recommendations by the Latvian
Norway ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Norway welcomes the Latvian delegation to Geneva and thank them for their One, remain a party to the Istanbul Convention and ensure its full and effective implementation to prevent and combat gender-based violence, including domestic violence. 2, ensure full and equal recognition and protection of LGBT+ persons under proportionate manner. And do not negatively affect equal access to education.
السيد نائب الرئيس يرحب وفد سلطنة.
Thank you, Vice President. We welcome the delegation of the friendly country of Latvia and commend the efforts to draw up the national report and the participatory approach. Mandatory for the youngest children, with support provided to inclusive education and specialized services for pupils with disabilities, and continue to strengthen the implementation of the plan on inclusive education for children with disabilities. We wish Latvia every success in this review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I call on Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Pakistan welcomes the delegation of Latvia and appreciates the presentation of its national report. We commend Latvia for strengthening its normative and institutional framework through the adoption of important policy guidelines promoting social inclusion and civic participation. While noting these positive developments in a constructive spirit, we recommend Latvia, A, to strengthen measures to effectively combat hate speech and improve data collection on hate crimes. B, to ensure stronger oversight mechanisms for security services. C, to make further efforts for ensuring that border management fully respects the rights of asylum seekers and guarantees access to asylum procedures. We wish Latvia continued success in advancing human rights. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I call on Paraguay. Thank you, Vice President. We welcome delegation of Latvia and thank you for the report. We commend the efforts to implement the recommendations from the previous cycle, especially the reforms to the domestic norms, including the adoption of the plan to prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence to 2029. We respectfully recommend, 1, consider ratifying international human rights instruments that remain pending and withdraw reservations to the Convention on the Status of Refugees and the Convention on the Status of Stateless Persons. 2, establish effective mechanisms and take all necessary measures to encourage complaints against violence against women, ensuring access by women and girls to information on their rights, protection measures and resources, and preventing stigmatization and re-victimization. 3, gradually eliminate institutionalization of children, encouraging care in family environments and make progress on inclusive strategies to reduce the disproportionate number of migrant origin children in special classes. And 4, consider establishing a national implementation, reporting and follow-up mechanism for human rights recommendations, and with a possibility of receiving cooperation for that in line with the recommendation from the previous cycle. Thank you. Thank you. I call on Peru. Thank you, Vice President. Peru warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia and thanks it for presenting its report. We recognize the progress since the last cycle, in particular the ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. In a constructive spirit, Peru recommends, 1, adopt and apply a legislative framework and comprehensive policies against discrimination to guarantee equality and access to economic, social and cultural rights and strengthen prevention, investigation and punishment of hate speech and hate crimes. 2, step up efforts to improve detention conditions, guaranteeing the right to life of all persons deprived of liberty and strengthening healthcare services, including for mental health. 3, step up efforts to prevent, combat and punish trafficking in persons, enjoyment of human rights for the whole population of Latvia. Thank you.
La palabra distinguida.
Thank you. I call on the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Philippines warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Latvia and its comprehensive national report. We commend Latvia for progress in the promotion of gender equality and the rights of children, minorities, and other vulnerable groups. In particular, we welcome the adoption of the guidelines for the development of children, youth, and family 2022 to 2027, the plan for preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence 2024 to 2029. One, step up efforts to address hate speech and hate crimes by improving reporting and data collection, strengthening investigation and prosecution, and promoting public awareness. 2, national referral mechanism. And 3, enhance human rights education and training for the police, border authorities, prosecutors, and judges, including on the rights of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers and the principle of non-refoulement. The Philippines wishes Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished ambassador of Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Portugal thanks the delegation of Latvia for the presentation of their national report. Portugal commends Latvia's efforts to improve conditions in the prison system, notably through the construction of the Liepāja prison, with strengthened rehabilitation initiatives, including access to education and employment opportunities. We also welcome the adoption by Latvia of the plan for preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence 24-29 as an important step towards strengthening prevention, victim protection, and accountability for perpetrators. In a constructive spirit, Portugal recommends that Latvia consider ratifying the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And secondly, continue efforts to improve access to quality mental health services, namely by promoting integrated community-based care and increasing the availability of trained mental health professionals. Portugal wishes Latvia a very successful review. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Republic of Korea warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia and appreciates its ongoing efforts to further promote human rights. In particular, we commend the ratification of the Istanbul Convention and the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. With such valuable moves forward in mind, we would like to recommend the following. 1. Continue ongoing efforts to safeguard the rights of women from all forms of discrimination and harmful practices, both by strengthening current legal framework and raising public awareness in this regard. 2. Take further steps to ensure broader access to legal procedures for asylum seekers and refugees. 3. Consider taking measures to enhance social integration of
promote and uphold human rights. This is reflected in several national policy planning documents across various sectors, such as on gender equality, combating domestic violence, supporting persons with disabilities, children, and young persons. We appreciate Latvia's commitment to promote and support dialogue and cooperation between the public administration and civil society. We also commend the efforts made to strengthen media literacy. While welcoming the ratification of the Istanbul Convention, we express our genuine hope that Latvia will remain party to the treaty. In a constructive spirit, Moldova recommends the following. 1. Redouble efforts to prevent, combat, and punish trafficking in persons, including through the effective implementation of the National Plan 2025-2027. Second, continue strengthening the national human rights institutions, including by ensuring the full compliance with the Paris Principles. Third, consider the ratification of the Global Convention on the Recognition of Qualifications Concerning Higher Education. We wish the delegation of Latvia a very successful UPR review. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Vice President. We're very concerned of the organization of regular public meetings that justify Nazism. We recommend preventing these annual meetings near the Soldiers' Memorial in Riga and condemn any attempts to deface these memorials, to stop the repression against people who protest against the damage to the memorials and participate in the 9th May victory celebrations. We recommend that all of the rights of non-citizens be upheld and that they be integrated fully without discrimination in society. And we recommend that Alexander Gaponin, 71 years old, be freed. He was judged guilty because of discrimination against the Russian language population. We recommend an end to the discrimination against linguistic minorities and interaction with the authorities on this. We recommend stopping and preventing racist and xenophobic hate speech and to take measures to stop the use of hate speech on the internet. I thank you. Disclaimer, the statement was read too fast for complete interpretation. I call on Rwanda.
Through a comprehensive set of strategic national guidelines across multiple sectors, notably the Cultural Education Strategy 2025-2027. Rwanda further appreciates the progress achieved by Latvia in strengthening public participation and social and civil society engagement as reflected in its robust civic space with adopting and effectively implement a comprehensive anti-discrimination legislative and policy framework that guarantees equal and non-discriminatory access to all economic, social, and cultural rights. 2, strengthen efforts to combat hate speech and hate crimes by ensuring that all such incidents are effectively investigated and perpetrators are truly prosecuted.
Republic of Serbia welcomes the delegation of Latvia at the European session and thanks it for presenting its national report. We appreciate the efforts of Latvia in responding to the recommendations from the previous UPR cycle. In the spirit of constructiveness, we recommend the following. First, strengthen efforts to increase women's representation in public administration at all levels, particularly in senior and decision-making positions. And second, enhance the legal and institutional framework to combat trafficking in persons by ensuring effective investigation and prosecution, strong victim protection, and adequate resources for relevant authorities and support services. Serbia wishes Latvia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Slovakia.
Mr. Vice President, Slovakia welcomes the delegation of Latvia and its national report. We highly value the efforts undertaken by the Latvian Ombudsman, Ms. Karina Palkova, in preparation for this UPR, including her outreach to the diplomatic community in Riga. We regard the Ombudsman's office as an active and forward-looking national institution that makes a meaningful contribution to the protection and promotion of human rights in Latvia. We commend Latvia for taking many positive steps. At the same time, we would like to offer following recommendations. To continue prioritizing the protection of children's rights, including further strengthening and reforming the orphan court system. To take additional measures to improve access to healthcare, in particular for children and other vulnerable groups. To enhance accessibility for persons with disabilities, including access to media information and public buildings. We wish Latvia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished ambassador of Slovenia.
Mr. Vice President, Slovenia commends the government of Latvia for its commitment to the UPR process. We welcome Latvia's efforts to strengthen human rights institutions in general, leading to stronger rule of law and protection for civil society. Slovenia remains concerned, however, about gender-based violence in Latvia, especially Roma women and girls. We recommend Latvia to continue efforts to fully implement all provisions of the Istanbul Convention, as well as ensuring effective protection and prevention mechanisms. We are concerned about the violations of children's rights. While systems to protect child victims are improving, there is need for better early detection and prevention. In order to give children a stronger voice, we recommend Latvia aligns itself with core principles of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Lastly, Slovenia strongly commends Latvia for strengthened gender equality policies, including with regards to equal opportunities in employment and education, reducing gender stereotypes, and integration of gender equality into policymaking. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished Deputy Ambassador of Spain. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Spain offers a cordial welcome to the delegation of Latvia. We thank them for their report. Spain recognizes the progress made in implementing recommendations from previous cycles, and in particular, gender equality and penitentiary reform. This includes the ratification of the OPCAT In a constructive spirit, Spain recommends to Latvia the following. 1, modify the system for the promotion and protection of the rights of children based on a more homogeneous standard model, particularly as regards the so-called orphan courts. 2, improve the accessibility to buildings for persons with disabilities, broadening their participation in public matters. 3, ratify the optional protocol of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and maintain efforts to ensure the full implementation of the Istanbul Convention. We wish Latvia success in this review. Much obliged. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
Mr. Vice President, Sri Lanka warmly welcomes the delegation of Latvia review. Sri Lanka commends Latvia for taking advanced measures to analyze the impact of artificial intelligence on information integrity, which is crucial in this modern world, and introducing 2 new criminal offenses related to AI into its criminal law to significantly increase the transparency of the election process and protect the public against manipulations. In a constructive spirit, Sri Lanka recommends Latvia to 1, further promote increased representation of women at all levels, especially in decision-making levels in the public administration. 2, further strengthen national efforts to prevent, combat, and protect trafficking in persons. And 3, further enhance measures to implement its national commitment to achieving a net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. We wish Latvia a successful UPR. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sweden.
Thank you, Vice President. Sweden welcomes Latvia's commitments to human rights and the progress made in implementing previous UPR recommendations made by Sweden, including efforts to improve conditions in prisons and detention centers. Sweden also welcomes progress on LGBTIQ persons' enjoyment of human rights through the introduction of a partnership law, as well as the ratification of the Istanbul Convention. While noting this progress, Sweden would like to make the following recommendations. 1, refrain from denouncing the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. 2, adopt legislation to ensure that same-sex partnerships enjoy the same legal rights, protections, and responsibilities as marriage, in line with the principles of equality and non-discrimination. 3, strengthen efforts to prevent and combat human trafficking related to vulnerable groups at increased risk, such as children and young adults in institutional care or transitioning out of such care. We wish Latvia a productive review. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland. Mr. Vice President, Switzerland welcomes the delegation of Latvia, and we thank the delegation for its report, and we offer the following recommendations. 1, ratify the optional protocol on the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. 2, ensure the implementation of the Convention of the Council of Europe on the Prevention and Fight Against Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, known as the Istanbul Convention, and strengthen measures for awareness raising in order to increase understanding and knowledge of this among the public. 3rd, strengthen measures to fight against violence against detainees, particularly by increasing penitentiary staff. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We will now hear from the delegation of the representative of Tajikistan through a video message.
Thank you. The Republic of Tajikistan welcomes the comprehensive national report delivered by the distinguished delegation of Latvia. We appreciate the progress made by Latvia in active advancing of reforms of normative and institutional framework, including guidelines on development of a cohesive and civically active society, social protection and labor market policy, development of children, youth, and family. We recommend in a constructive spirit to Latvia, 1, to further focus on strengthening gender equality policy and support mechanisms for the prevention of violence against women in accordance with Istanbul Convention. 2, share its experience in promoting the right to high quality and inclusive education, including through circulating the informative report on development of inclusive education at all levels of education among the UN member states. 3, to undertake additional measures for strengthening labor market accessibility, equal opportunities, and social protection. We wish the delegation of Latvia an effective review. Thank you.
With that, we have exhausted our speakers list. And I will now give the floor anew and for one last time to the delegation of Latvia that they may respond to observations and comments or offer concluding remarks for this review. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Before closing remarks, I would like to react on two subjects that we heard. One is on climate change, and second would be on inclusive education. First of all, on the climate change. In 2023, the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights assessed that Latvia's progress to mitigate the impacts of climate change has been sufficient. Latvia has made progress primarily through the adoption of comprehensive policy planning and legislative framework to ensure clean, healthy and sustainable environment. A key milestone in the climate is the Climate Resilience and Economic Sustainability Law of December 2025. The national strategy for achieving climate neutrality by 2050 will be reviewed in the near future. These measures contribute to safeguarding a clean environment and addressing climate-related risks in a systemic and long-term manner, in line with Latvia's regional and international obligations. The 2026 to 2030 emissions reduction plan aims to improve air quality by reducing key air pollutants and will promote air quality levels that are adequate for the protection of human health and ecosystems. Secondly, we thank the delegations for their recommendations regarding inclusive education and remain committed to promoting the right to quality education for learners with disabilities, minority and migrant backgrounds, in line with our national and international commitments. In conclusion, Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, delegates, on behalf of the delegation of Latvia, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to all states represented here today for their constructive participation, their comments and recommendations across a wide range of areas. We endeavored to engage and respond to key issues raised. I can assure you that we take recommendations made here today very seriously. Our position on all of them will be thoroughly reviewed. Many of recommendations will contribute to our ongoing national efforts in advancing human rights. I would like to conclude by once again reiterating Latvia's firm commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights and Latvia's continued support for a strong, inclusive and effective multilateral human rights system, advancing human rights globally. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank namely the Dominican Republic, France, and Pakistan, in accordance with the procedure implemented in 2015. The recommendations section of the report is scheduled for distribution on Thursday, 14 May at 12:30 p.m. In addition, let me recall that, according to the President's statement of 8 December 2025, the recommendation section of all reports of the working group will be considered for adoption on Friday, 15 May, in the last meeting of the session from 2:30 p.m. The full report, including the summary section, will be distributed by email on Friday, 22 May 2026. This brings us to the end of our meeting. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for the review of Sierra Leone. Speaking time will be 1 minute for all. We call for those speakers inscribed in the list or who wish to withdraw from the list are kindly invited to use the online system event for withdrawals at least at the latest 30 minutes before the start of the review. Without further ado, I hereby close the 12th meeting of the 52nd session of the working group of the UPR.